Hey guys, tonight we're going on a journey through time and around the world to explore the quiet yet profound history of one of the world's most important crops, rice. Yes, the humble grain that so often sits at the side of your plate, rice. You probably didn't know that this small, simple food has been the cornerstone of civilizations, economies and cultures for thousands of years. Picture yourself in a lush, wet paddy field somewhere in Asia. The air is thick with the scent of water, mud, and plants growing in the warm sun. You probably won't survive this journey without a newfound appreciation for this grain that has been feeding humanity for millennia. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Oh, and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. It's always fun to see how far this story travels. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Let's begin where it all started, at the very beginning of rice. Rice, as we know it today, didn't always grow in neat, organised paddies. It all began with a wild grass found in the river valleys of Asia. This grass, over thousands of years, would be carefully cultivated and selected by early farmers to produce the rice that would feed an entire world. The origins of rice farming can be traced back to around 10,000 years ago, in the fertile river valleys of the Yangtze River in China. It's here that the story of rice begins to take shape. Imagine the scene. Ancient farmers, likely the first human cultivators, recognizing the potential of a wild plant that grew along the riverbanks. They noticed how its seeds were easily harvested and how they could store and cook them, making them a perfect food source. Over time, they began to shape the land to fit the needs of rice farming. Fields were cleared, water channels dug, and paddies formed. These early farmers were pioneers in understanding the land, water and seasons. Rice cultivation, with its careful balance of wet and dry conditions, was a technical art, requiring knowledge of hydrology and weather patterns, which makes its early domestication all the more impressive. Historians still argue whether rice was domesticated in the Yangtze River Valley first, or if its domestication occurred independently in Southeast Asia as well. Some suggest that rice may have been cultivated in both places at the same time, developing in different regions based on the natural landscape. Regardless of where rice was first grown, its origins lie in Asia, and from here it would spread across the globe, influencing cultures, economies, and cuisines in ways we can't yet fully comprehend. But even in its earliest form, rice wasn't just a food, it was a symbol of human ingenuity, of survival, and of the connection between people and the land. The sound of early rice farming was likely not just the rustling of leaves, but the steady sound of the labour, the planting, the tending, and the harvesting. It was the sound of hands in the earth, of water flowing through canals, and the soft, rhythmic splash of feet in the flooded paddies. Rice farming was a labour of love, and it would soon shape the very foundation of societies. As you stand there in the verdant, waterlogged fields of ancient China, you can hear the soft murmur of a river flowing nearby, its waters gently lapping at the edges of the rice paddies. Rice, in its wild form, had grown naturally along the edges of rivers, but it was here, in the rich river valleys of Southeast Asia, that humans began to harness its full potential. The fertile floodplains of the Yangtze River provided the perfect environment for rice to thrive. It was in these riverside fields around 10,000 years ago that the first farmers started shaping the landscape to suit their needs. Over the centuries, their small plots of rice fields would grow into the foundations of what we now know as one of the world's oldest agricultural practices. Picture the scene: early farmers, equipped with simple tools, carefully selecting the wild varieties of rice that yielded the most bountiful harvests. They may not have known it at the time, but they were effectively setting the stage for a food that would become central to the diets of billions of people. Rice was one of the first crops to be domesticated in Asia, and it quickly became a staple, supporting not just individual households, but entire civilizations. The people of ancient China didn't just rely on rice for nutrition, they also began to incorporate it into their culture, economy, and social structure. Historians still argue whether rice farming began simultaneously in other parts of Asia, like Southeast Asia or the Indian subcontinent. While China is considered the birthplace of rice cultivation, evidence suggests that rice also spread to places like India and the Indo-Gangetic Plains, where rice farming was independently developed. The ways these civilizations adapted rice farming to their unique landscapes are still a matter of study, with some scholars suggesting that rice farming in Southeast Asia may have even influenced its development in China. In both regions, rice farming became a communal effort, coordinating the water flow, irrigation, and labour required to maintain the fields. This communal effort was one of the earliest forms of agricultural collaboration. As rice farming spread, so did the sound of rice cultivation, the rhythmic splashing of water, the scrape of tools cutting through mud, the chatter of workers coordinating efforts in the fields. These sounds became the pulse of early societies in Southeast Asia, shaping everything from local economies to social structures. Rice wasn't just food, it was the lifeblood of early Asian societies. As the grains grew, so did the social systems that depended on them. Farmers worked together to build irrigation systems, and rice cultivation became a central part of community life. This connection between rice and society didn't remain confined to China. Rice farming spread to Korea, Japan, and other parts of Southeast Asia, shaping the social, economic, and cultural identities of these regions. As rice became a symbol of prosperity, communities began to build temples and shrines dedicated to rice deities. Rice was no longer just a crop. It was seen as a gift from the gods, a source of life. In Japan, for example, rice has long been revered in Shinto rituals, where rice offerings are made to deities during harvest festivals. The sound of rice in these ancient rituals was more than just the rustling of crops. It was the sound of reverence, of communities coming together to give thanks for their harvests. By this time, rice was more than just a plant. It was a core element of life itself. The rhythmic labour of growing rice became a shared experience that tied communities together, binding them to the land and to each other. Even today, rice cultivation continues to shape the cultures of Asia. Imagine the steady hum of modern-day rice paddies, the gentle splash of water, and the soft chatter of farmers as they work. These sounds, echoing through the centuries, are the heartbeat of Asia's agricultural heritage, a heritage that began in those early fields along the Yangtze River and has continued to thrive ever since. As you continue to stand in those early rice fields, imagine how the rice crop began to shape the very foundation of ancient Asian societies. Rice wasn't just a food source, it was a key element in the development of early civilization itself. Rice farming became the engine of growth for the ancient societies of China, India, and Southeast Asia, driving their economies, shaping their social structures, and even influencing their belief systems. It was in these fertile river valleys that the seeds of civilization began to sprout, with rice being at the heart of it all. China, for example, quickly saw the rise of a centralized agricultural society where rice was the backbone of the economy. The early Chinese were experts in managing the water that flowed through their land, building intricate irrigation systems that not only allowed rice to grow, but also supported the growth of entire dynasties. By around 3000 BCE, the Chinese were cultivating rice in wet paddies, using techniques that would continue to evolve for millennia. The labour of planting, tending, and harvesting rice became a communal effort that strengthened the social bonds of these early societies. Historians still argue whether rice cultivation in China was initially the work of independent farmers or if it was a project heavily supported by the state. What is clear, however, is that rice was vital to the success of early Chinese civilization. As rice spread throughout China, it also spread to neighbouring regions, first to the Yangtze River basin and then outward to other regions in Southeast Asia. Ancient India, for example, began cultivating rice around 1500 BCE, and by 500 BCE, rice had become a staple food crop in the Indian subcontinent. The Indian subcontinent's vast rivers, the Ganges, the Indus, and the Brahmaputra, created fertile soil for rice cultivation, and the techniques developed in China would soon be adopted in India as well. In India, rice became not only a food source, but also an important element of religious and cultural rituals. Just as the Chinese revered rice deities, so too did the Indians, and rice was used in sacred offerings and ceremonies to honour the gods. But the spread of rice didn't stop there. The influence of rice cultivation reached as far as Southeast Asia, where the diverse cultures of Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos all adopted rice farming as a central part of their way of life. Historians still debate exactly how rice spread to Southeast Asia. Was it brought by migrating peoples from southern China, or was it independently cultivated in the region? While the exact origins are unclear, what is certain is that rice became integral to the development of Southeast Asian civilizations. It not only sustained populations, but also created an economic system built on rice farming that would last for thousands of years. In places like Cambodia and Thailand, rice became so important that it was often used as currency, a commodity exchanged in markets alongside other agricultural goods. The impact of rice on the rise of Southeast Asian kingdoms and cultures cannot be overstated. In places like Cambodia, the powerful Khmer Empire thrived for centuries, largely due to its ability to harness rice production. The empire's vast irrigation system supported the cultivation of rice, which in turn fueled the economy, allowing the Khmer to build grand temples and monuments like the famous Angkor Wat. The sound of water flowing through irrigation channels and the rhythmic labour of rice farmers became the lifeblood of the Khmer people, connecting them to the land, to each other, and to the divine. In Vietnam, rice cultivation played a central role in the development of the ancient culture, where it became a symbol of fertility and prosperity. Even as rice cultivation expanded throughout Asia, it wasn't just the people of Asia who benefited from the grain. The influence of rice farming began to spread outward from the east, making its way to the Mediterranean world, to Africa, and eventually to the Americas. Through trade routes and the movement of people, rice became a commodity that shaped global history. Yet, as rice spread across continents, it also became a part of local cultures in ways that reflected the unique identities of each region. Historians still argue over the precise nature of rice's spread. Was it primarily the result of trade, or was it brought by specific groups of travellers and colonizers? Some argue that rice was introduced to Africa through the Arab trade routes, while others suggest that it was carried by Portuguese traders during the Age of Exploration. Regardless of how it spread, what's clear is that rice became a global commodity, influencing the development of civilizations far beyond its Asian birthplace. In Africa, for example, rice began to be cultivated in parts of West Africa by the 15th century, and over time it became an essential crop for millions of people. African rice farming techniques, developed over centuries, would later influence the way rice was grown in the Americas. From Asia to Africa, and across the seas to the New World, rice became a cornerstone of agriculture and human survival. Its global journey is a testament to its resilience, adaptability, and enduring significance in human history. Now that we've explored the fascinating spread of rice across Asia and its profound impact on local societies, let's travel even further in time to understand how rice reached the far-flung corners of the globe. It wasn't just the growing power of kingdoms in Southeast Asia or the vast trade routes of ancient civilizations that helped rice spread across continents. No, it was the forces of empire, colonization, and trade that played an equally significant role in the global journey of rice. The first real significant interaction between rice and the Western world came in the 15th century, during the Age of Exploration. As European explorers began charting new territories, they brought back more than just precious metals and exotic goods. They also brought back plants, including rice, which would soon change the way food was produced and consumed on a global scale. The Portuguese, who were among the first European nations to establish trade routes to Asia, introduced rice to the Mediterranean in the late 1400s, particularly to the Iberian Peninsula. Spain and Portugal, with their newly formed empires and global maritime routes, were the gateways through which rice began to trickle into Europe. You can imagine the scene, European traders arriving in bustling Asian ports, their ships laden not just with spices, silk and porcelain, but with sacks of rice. This new crop, which had been growing in Asia for thousands of years, was now taking root in the fertile soils of Europe. Historians still debate how quickly rice took hold in Europe. Some suggest that the introduction of rice to Europe was a slow process, while others argue that it spread rapidly, especially in southern regions where rice was perfectly suited to the warm, wet climate. In Spain and Italy, rice began to be cultivated in the wetland areas, and it wasn't long before it became a central ingredient in Mediterranean cuisine. In fact, rice-based dishes such as Italian risotto and Spanish paella became staple foods that continue to define these regions today. But the real explosion of rice cultivation came in the 17th and 18th centuries, with the rise of colonial empires. European colonization of the Americas and Africa had a profound impact on global agriculture, and rice was no exception. The Atlantic slave trade, which forcibly moved millions of Africans to the New World, played a pivotal role in rice cultivation in the Americas. Slaves brought with them their expertise in rice farming, knowledge passed down through generations in West Africa. These enslaved Africans knew the ins and outs of wet rice cultivation, and they used this knowledge to transform the agricultural landscape of the American South. In fact, the Carolinas and Georgia became known for their rice plantations, which would become one of the key exports of the region. You can almost hear the sounds of those early rice plantations in the American South. The rhythmic swishing of sickles in the fields, the constant flow of water through the carefully designed irrigation systems, and the chatter of labourers as they work together to cultivate this now valuable crop. The labour-intensive nature of rice farming created a social hierarchy in the American South, with enslaved Africans forming the backbone of rice production. The economic power of rice in the South was immense, fueling both the plantation economy and the broader economy of the United States. But rice's journey didn't stop with the Americas. As the global demand for rice grew, so too did its cultivation in other parts of the world. By the late 18th and early 19th centuries, rice had reached the vast expanse of Africa, where it became an integral crop in many parts of the continent. Just as it had in Asia, rice became essential to local diets, and the cultivation techniques used in Africa were influenced by both indigenous practices and the methods brought over by European colonists. Historians still debate the exact role that African rice played in the global rice economy. Some argue that African rice was the preferred variety in the Americas due to its resilience and adaptability to the hot, humid climates, while others point to the introduction of Asian varieties as being just as important. Rice cultivation in Africa would go on to shape not only local economies, but also agricultural practices across the continent. The spread of rice farming across Africa was marked by the adaptation of traditional practices, including the development of terraced fields and irrigation systems to meet the needs of growing populations. Even today, rice remains one of the most important staple foods in Africa, particularly in countries like Nigeria, Senegal and Madagascar, where it is grown both for local consumption and export. At the same time, rice was quietly making its way to the islands of the Pacific, the Caribbean, and even the farthest corners of Oceania. Through trade, migration and colonization, rice found a place in countless other cuisines and agricultural systems, each region adapting the crop to its own needs and cultural tastes. Rice, it seems, was becoming a global commodity, one that had travelled from the lush valleys of Asia to the farthest reaches of the globe, carried by sailors, traders and explorers who recognized its value not just as food, but as a cultural bridge between East and West. In the end, the spread of rice throughout the world was not just about the movement of a crop. It was about the movement of knowledge, culture, and people. The sounds of rice, whether in the lush paddies of Southeast Asia, the swaying fields of the American South, or the bustling markets of West Africa, were the sounds of a world interconnected by the forces of trade, migration, and empire. Rice, in all its forms, became a symbol of the way in which humanity, through the exchange of ideas, cultures, and agricultural practices, could adapt and thrive in new environments, creating something that would nourish generations to come. By now, you may be wondering how rice could become so ingrained in the daily lives and economies of so many diverse cultures across the world. After all, rice isn't just a food, it's woven into the very fabric of history. But let's stop for a moment and consider the silent work of rice as it moves into new parts of the world, becoming a crucial part of not only diets, but also social and cultural life. This quiet journey of rice has made it a symbol of sustenance, survival, and prosperity. From the plantations of the American South to the rain-fed paddies of Southeast Asia, rice is often seen as more than just a crop. It's an identity. Let's take a trip back to Southeast Asia. Rice's spiritual and cultural home. It's not just a food here, it's a living symbol of harmony with the land. For centuries, rice has been revered in rituals, traditions, and even in daily life. In many parts of Southeast Asia, the act of rice farming is intertwined with spiritual beliefs. Farmers don't just tend to their rice, they pay respect to rice deities, offer prayers, and perform ceremonial rites before planting and harvesting their crops. The fields, the water, the plants, everything is sacred. As the seasons change and the rice paddies transform, so too do the people who live within the rhythms of the land. Picture the delicate process of transplanting rice seedlings in the paddy fields. The sound of splashing water underfoot as farmers work together, hands in the soil. Each movement is deliberate, guided by generations of agricultural wisdom passed down through families and communities. There's a rhythm to it, an almost meditative quality to how the work is done, with farmers walking through the flooded fields like slow-moving ripples in water. The sound of soft chatter and the splash of footsteps fills the air. The earth is alive with the activity of farming, and the connection between people and the land becomes almost spiritual. Rice farming in Southeast Asia is more than just about food security. It's about preserving a way of life, a cultural heritage that has been passed down for thousands of years. This deep connection to rice also extends to the art and culture of the region. Rice has inspired music, dance, and even visual arts. In Thailand, rice festivals are held every year, where people celebrate the harvest and give thanks for the bounty of the land. These festivals are lively, filled with music, dance, and the sharing of rice-based dishes. The sounds of these festivals, the laughter, the music, and the joy of community are just as important as the food itself. The rice connects people, uniting them in a celebration of both tradition and nature's generosity. Historians still debate the exact role of rice in the development of early Southeast Asian kingdoms. Was it simply an economic commodity, or did it play a more profound role in shaping social and political structures? Some scholars argue that rice farming helped develop the complex irrigation systems that supported ancient kingdoms like Angkor in Cambodia. Others suggest that rice farming created a stratified society, with rulers and elites exerting control over the distribution of rice, thus solidifying their power. But one thing is clear: rice was central to both the economy and culture of Southeast Asia, influencing everything from trade to religion to social hierarchies. In addition to its spiritual significance, rice also became a cultural marker, especially in the centuries when the European colonization of Asia began to shape the continent. As European powers sought control over parts of Southeast Asia, rice became a focal point of both the colonial economy and the resistance movements that emerged in the wake of colonization. Rice farming was tied to local economies, and the colonizers quickly realized its importance, using it as an export commodity to fuel their growing empires. For the native populations, however, rice farming became a symbol of survival and resilience, a way to hold on to their land, culture, and traditions despite foreign domination. Now, let's shift to Africa, where rice's journey takes on a new twist. While the African rice varieties have a long history of cultivation in West Africa, the rice introduced from Asia during the colonial era became a major crop in the region. Rice played an essential role in feeding populations and shaping agricultural economies, particularly in areas where other crops struggled to thrive. West African rice, known for its resilience and adaptability, became a staple food, and it was deeply woven into the fabric of daily life. Yet again, rice wasn't just a crop, it was central to the cultural and social structure of the region. In countries like Senegal, Mali, and Sierra Leone, rice became more than a food. It was a cultural symbol of prosperity and community. The annual rice harvest was not just an economic event, it was a time of celebration, of song, and of ritual. The sounds of the harvest echoed through the countryside, with farmers singing, dancing, and celebrating the bounty of the land. The social ties formed around rice cultivation were strong, and families would work together to bring in the harvest, ensuring the survival of their communities. However, this story isn't without its darker side. The arrival of European colonization in Africa meant that rice farming was often taken over by foreign powers. Large-scale rice plantations were established by colonists, and the labour required to sustain them often came at the expense of local populations. Forced labour, exploitation, and the imposition of foreign agricultural systems disrupted traditional rice farming practices. Yet, even in the face of adversity, rice remained a vital part of the African identity. Despite the challenges brought by colonization, rice continued to be a symbol of resilience, and it would later become a central crop in the independence movements of the 20th century. In this way, the history of rice is not just the history of a crop, it's the history of human resilience, adaptation, and cultural survival. From the floodplains of Southeast Asia to the heart of West Africa, rice has connected people to the land and to each other, shaping societies and communities for thousands of years. Its journey through history is a testament to the power of food, not just as sustenance, but as a cultural force that transcends borders and unites us all. Rice is, in many ways, the silent thread that binds humanity across time and space. As the story of rice unfolds, the focus shifts to how it became not just a staple food, but a powerful symbol of resilience and adaptation in the face of imperialism, war, and changing global dynamics. By now, rice had travelled far beyond the fields of Asia, Africa, and the Americas, moving across continents, crossing borders, and spreading its influence across the globe. Yet it wasn't just the spread of rice farming itself that had a profound impact on societies. It was how rice became a political and economic tool used by empires, colonists, and even resistant populations to shape the course of history. Let's now take a closer look at the Mediterranean region. It wasn't long before rice made its way into the heart of southern Europe, where it would eventually become a culinary cornerstone. The first significant interactions with rice in Europe occurred thanks to the trading networks of the Spanish and the Portuguese during the Age of Exploration. When these empires began expanding their reach across the world, they established agricultural outposts in parts of Asia and Africa. In the 16th century, Spanish explorers brought rice to Spain from the lands they had encountered in Asia and Africa, and its adaptability to the warm, wet climate of Spain's southern regions made it an immediate success. The Spanish influence on rice cultivation in Europe was profound, especially in regions like Valencia, where rice paddies began to be systematically cultivated. Picture the land: vast flat stretches of farmland carefully divided into squares, each section of the land flooded with water, nurturing the growth of the rice plants. The process was meticulous, each step a dance between land, water, and labour. In time, the Spanish began exporting rice to the rest of Europe. Rice soon became an integral part of Mediterranean cuisine, used in everything from risottos in Italy to the beloved paella in Spain. Historians still debate whether rice cultivation in Spain was a direct continuation of knowledge brought from Asia, or if it was influenced by the agricultural practices of other Mediterranean crops, such as millet or barley. What is certain is that rice transformed the culinary culture of Spain and Italy. It became an essential ingredient in various dishes that were tied to the identity of each region. But the spread of rice in Europe wasn't just limited to the Iberian Peninsula. As trade routes expanded, rice made its way to Italy, France, and even the Balkans, influencing food cultures all across the continent. The spread of rice wasn't just about food, it was about power and control. As we know, rice farming became a cornerstone of the global trade network during the colonial period. In the American colonies, rice played a central role in the economies of the southern states. The use of enslaved Africans to cultivate rice in the lowland areas of South Carolina and Georgia led to the development of a massive rice industry that would dominate for centuries. It's fascinating to consider the paradox. Rice, a crop grown by enslaved people, would become the engine that fueled the wealth of the American South, reinforcing the institution of slavery and contributing to the tensions that would later lead to the Civil War. The sounds of rice farming in the American South, whether it was the splash of water through irrigation canals or the quiet, laborious movements of workers in the fields, were intertwined with the larger rhythms of plantation economy and slavery. Rice, as a crop, was not only economically important but politically powerful. Rice production formed the backbone of the southern economy and influenced policies, land use, and even social structure. The legacy of rice in the American South is still felt today, as the crop continues to be a key part of the agricultural landscape. But rice's journey to the Americas was not just about economics and politics, it was also a story of cultural survival. Enslaved Africans brought with them centuries of knowledge about rice cultivation, knowledge that was passed down through generations and ultimately helped shape the rice-growing industry in the South. In the Caribbean, rice took on another significance. When the Spanish and Portuguese colonists brought African slaves to work the rice fields, they also brought their unique agricultural expertise. West Africans were known for their sophisticated knowledge of rice cultivation, particularly in areas where water management was essential to successful harvests. This knowledge became vital in the Caribbean, where rice farming thrived in the swamps of Jamaica, Haiti, and Cuba. In these places, rice farming wasn't just about subsistence, it became an economic driver, shaping the very fabric of life in the Caribbean islands. The agricultural labour that sustained rice plantations was tied to the broader global economy, and rice became both a commodity and a cultural expression, with each region adding its unique flair to the dishes that would later become part of the global culinary tradition. Historians often debate how rice farming shaped the cultural identity of African diasporas in the Americas. Was it merely a way to survive, or did it become a form of resistance against the systemic oppression of slavery? In many ways, rice farming allowed African populations in the Americas to assert their knowledge and skills, maintaining a sense of cultural identity even in the face of enslavement. The agricultural techniques they brought with them would leave a lasting impact on rice cultivation in the Americas. The sounds of rice farming in the Caribbean and the American South, the rustling of water, the shuffling of feet, the hum of agricultural activity, were more than just the sounds of labour. They were also the sounds of resilience and survival. As rice continued to spread across the world, it also started to shape the global economy in new ways. By the 18th century, rice had become one of the most traded commodities in the world. It was no longer just a crop cultivated by local communities. It was a global product, traded across oceans and continents, connecting Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Americas in a vast network of commerce. The global rice trade would have profound economic, cultural, and social effects as countries and empires jockeyed for control of rice-producing regions and competed to dominate the rice markets. The sounds of rice, whether in the fields of China, the plantations of the American South, or the kitchens of Europe, became part of the rhythm of global trade and power. As we step into the 19th century, the landscape of rice cultivation shifts once again. The advent of the Industrial Revolution, the rise of mechanized agriculture, and the global push for colonial expansion created a new wave of interest in rice. The rice fields that once required manual labor and the collective effort of entire communities now began to be transformed by modern tools and techniques, changing not just how rice was grown, but who grew it and for whom. The expansion of rice farming during this time was heavily influenced by both the technological advances of the Industrial Revolution and the rise of global trade networks. As steam-powered engines and mechanical tools became more widespread, the labour-intensive process of rice cultivation began to change. New technologies such as the rice mill were introduced to improve efficiency and productivity. These mills, which were powered by steam engines, could process rice on a larger scale, separating the husk from the grain much more efficiently than by hand. The sound of rice being milled, once the soft rhythmic thud of a wooden pestle striking a mortar, was now replaced by the loud mechanical hum of steam-powered machines. The soundscape of rice farming shifted from the gentle, quiet labour of the fields to the booming, industrious clatter of machines. But even as machines began to change the nature of rice farming, the global demand for rice continued to rise. As populations in Europe, the Americas, and Asia grew, so did the need for rice. In particular, the growing industrial cities of Europe required massive amounts of food to sustain their populations, and rice became a key part of the global supply chain. The demand for rice in the burgeoning cities of the Western world, along with the expansion of European colonial empires, drove a significant increase in rice production in Asia and Africa. In Southeast Asia, rice farmers began adapting their cultivation methods to meet the new demand. While traditional farming methods had been focused on small-scale, community-based production, the growing market for rice led to an increase in large-scale farming operations. Large landowners or colonial powers took control of rice fields, implementing new agricultural techniques and expanding production. In these colonial rice plantations, rice became a commodity, grown not just for local consumption, but for export to Europe and the Americas. The sound of rice fields in Southeast Asia became a mixture of traditional farming practices and the new, large-scale methods imposed by foreign powers. At the same time, the colonization of Africa also brought significant changes to rice cultivation. The French, British, and Portuguese expanded rice farming in parts of West Africa, where the climate and soil were ideal for rice production. These new plantations were often established in regions that had previously relied on subsistence farming, and they were designed to meet the growing demand for rice in European markets. The agricultural landscape of Africa was altered by these colonial rice plantations, and rice became one of the key cash crops exported to Europe. But just like in the Americas, the rise of large-scale rice production came at a great cost. Local populations were often exploited for labour, and traditional agricultural practices were disrupted. Rice farming in Africa, however, was not just shaped by colonial powers. Indigenous farmers in places like Senegal, Mali, and Nigeria continued to grow rice using their own methods. These farmers often grew a variety of rice suited to their local conditions, including varieties that were more resilient to the dry, low-water environments found in parts of West Africa. As rice continued to be traded globally, African farmers were able to adapt their practices to the changing global market. Rice became a symbol of economic opportunity, but it also remained a vital part of local cultures and culinary traditions. As rice continued to shape the economies and societies of Asia, Africa, and the Americas, it became clear that the global trade in rice was not just about food, it was about power. The control of rice production and trade became a tool for colonial powers to maintain dominance over colonized regions. Rice was no longer just a staple food, it was a political weapon used to control land, resources, and labor. The sound of rice being harvested in colonial plantations wasn't just the sound of food being grown, it was the sound of economic exploitation, with millions of people across the globe working to sustain the rice economy while receiving little in return. At the same time, the rice trade brought new opportunities for some. In the United States, for example, rice cultivation in the South became a key part of the economy, contributing to the wealth of plantation owners. The rise of rice as a commodity crop created new markets and economic networks, and the demand for rice in Western countries drove further expansion of rice farming. The sounds of rice, whether in the bustling rice markets of Asia or the plantations of the American South, became part of the rhythm of the global economy, linking the agricultural practices of different regions with the industrialized world. Yet, as the 19th century drew to a close, the growing global demand for rice began to lead to environmental and social challenges. The rapid expansion of rice farming, particularly in Asia and Africa, started to deplete the land. Overfarming, the introduction of monocultures, and the destruction of wetlands began to take a toll on the environment. The mechanization of rice farming, while improving productivity, also led to the loss of biodiversity in rice-growing regions. This marked the beginning of a new era in rice farming, one where environmental sustainability became a major concern. Historians still debate whether the environmental cost of rice farming was fully understood during this time, or if the growing demand for rice overshadowed concerns about its ecological impact. What is clear is that the changing landscape of rice farming in the 19th century set the stage for the modern-day debates about sustainable agriculture, food security, and environmental conservation. As the sound of rice farming moved from the quiet, labour-intensive work of traditional methods to the mechanical hum of industrial agriculture, rice itself became a symbol of both progress and exploitation. Rice wasn't just a crop, it was a commodity, a tool of empire and a symbol of the complex forces that shape the world's economies and environments. As the 20th century dawned, rice's journey continued to evolve, reflecting the global shift toward modernization, industrialization, and the dramatic changes brought about by the world wars. The soundscape of rice farming and trade began to take on new dimensions as technological advances in agriculture, as well as the geopolitics of rice, continued to shape its place in global history. With the spread of mechanized agriculture and the increasing need to feed the world's growing population, rice became central to the discourse on food security and international trade. Let's take a moment to imagine yourself in the early years of the 20th century. The world is still recovering from the aftermath of the First Industrial Revolution, and the world wars are just beginning to loom on the horizon. In the United States, rice was already an important crop, especially in the southern states where it had been cultivated since the colonial period. However, it was during this period that the technology of rice production took a significant leap forward. Steam-powered rice mills, which had already been established in the 19th century, were now supplemented by new mechanized technologies that allowed for more efficient processing, making rice available to an even broader market. In Asia, meanwhile, the agricultural systems that had supported rice cultivation for centuries began to change. The introduction of modern farming techniques, such as chemical fertilizers and pesticides, allowed for higher yields and greater productivity. However, the impact of these new methods on the environment and on traditional farming practices was profound. The rise of industrial agriculture meant that rice, which had once been grown in small, family-run farms, was now being cultivated on an industrial scale, often under the supervision of larger corporations or governments. The once tranquil, labour-intensive sounds of the rice paddies, of farmers working together, transplanting rice seedlings, and managing the water, began to fade into the background, replaced by the drone of mechanised machinery and the rush of efficiency. In places like Japan, China, and India, rice production expanded to meet the growing demands of both domestic consumption and international trade. The sound of rice mills grinding away day and night became the soundtrack of modern rice farming, as rice transitioned from a rural, small-scale crop to a global commodity. While the mechanization of rice farming in the West had led to massive productivity gains, the spread of industrial agriculture across Asia created a more complicated dynamic. The benefits of higher yields and greater efficiency came at the cost of environmental sustainability, as the use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides began to harm the land and the surrounding ecosystems. One of the most significant developments during this period was the increased global demand for rice due to the growth of population and urbanization. By the early 20th century, rice was becoming a primary food source, not just for the rural agricultural communities of Asia, but for millions of urban dwellers as well. As cities expanded, rice became a staple in urban diets, and the distribution networks for rice grew to meet this new demand. The infrastructure needed to transport rice from rural farms to urban centres was rapidly developed, changing the way rice was produced, processed, and consumed. Historians still debate how the growth of rice production during this period impacted local economies. Some argue that the mechanization of rice farming, while improving efficiency, also led to the rise of large-scale agricultural enterprises that displaced small farmers. Others suggest that the industrialization of rice farming helped fuel economic growth in some regions, allowing nations to increase their agricultural output and feed their growing populations. Whatever the case, rice was becoming an increasingly vital part of the global food system, and its production and trade were becoming more and more interconnected. Rice also played a pivotal role during the World Wars. During World War I and World War II, rice became a crucial food source for both soldiers and civilians. In occupied regions of Asia, rice was often commandeered by occupying forces, which led to food shortages and widespread hunger. However, rice was also used as an important strategic resource by both the Axis and Allied powers, who sought to control rice-producing areas in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. For the first time in modern history, rice wasn't just a food, it was a weapon in a global conflict. The sounds of rice mills and the frantic efforts of farmers to keep pace with wartime demands took on a sense of urgency that had never been felt before. By the time the wars had ended and the global economy began to rebuild, the sound of rice mills had become a symbol of recovery. The introduction of large-scale agricultural practices, coupled with advances in transportation and infrastructure, made rice more accessible than ever before. Rice mills began to dot the landscape of countries around the world, from the United States to India to Indonesia, and rice became central to both domestic and international trade. The post-war period saw the rise of global rice trade organizations, such as the International Rice Research Institute, RRI, which was founded in 1960. This organization, based in the Philippines, aimed to improve rice farming through research and the development of high-yielding rice varieties. The sound of research labs, where scientists worked to develop new strains of rice, became just as important as the hum of the mills. The Green Revolution, which introduced new technologies and farming methods, played a major role in transforming rice farming during the 20th century. New varieties of rice were developed that were resistant to disease and pests, and these advancements helped to increase global rice production significantly. However, the Green Revolution also brought its own set of challenges. While it helped to increase the availability of rice, it also created problems related to environmental sustainability. The increased use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides took a toll on the land, while the reliance on large-scale industrial farming practices led to the displacement of traditional farming methods. As a result, the environmental soundscape of rice farming changed. Gone were the days of simple, sustainable techniques, replaced by the sounds of industrialized farming, with its heavy machinery and chemical processes. Historians still debate the long-term impact of the Green Revolution on rice farming. Some argue that it was a necessary response to the world's growing population and that it helped to prevent mass hunger. Others suggest that the long-term environmental costs, soil depletion, water scarcity, and the destruction of local ecosystems, were not fully understood at the time, and that the true consequences are still unfolding today. As the world entered the 21st century, rice continued to play a vital role in feeding the planet, yet the challenges faced by rice cultivation were becoming more complex. The rise of global trade, climate change, and the continued effects of industrialized farming were reshaping how rice was grown and distributed. The global demand for rice had only increased, but the environmental and social costs of its production had also become more apparent. In Asia, rice still occupied a central place in culture and economy, but it was under increasing pressure from modern agricultural practices. In countries like India and China, the expansion of urban areas was putting stress on the land traditionally used for rice paddies. Rapid urbanization and industrial development were transforming once fertile landscapes into sprawling cities, taking over agricultural fields and reducing the amount of land available for rice cultivation. Meanwhile, the growth of industrial agriculture meant that small family farms, which had once dominated the rice industry, were being replaced by larger, more mechanized farms. The traditional sounds of rice farming, such as the soft splash of water in the paddies, the rhythmic work of labourers, and the call and response of farmer communities, were being replaced by the hum of machines, the roar of tractors, and the speed of mass production. At the same time, the pressure to increase rice production to meet the needs of the world's growing population was intensifying. The sound of rice mills, which had become a staple of modern agriculture, continued to echo in global rice markets as more rice was processed for export. Countries like Thailand, Vietnam, and India became major exporters of rice, feeding not just their own populations but those of distant lands. In fact, rice became one of the most traded agricultural commodities in the world, and its economic significance only continued to rise. The quiet clink of rice bags being unloaded from cargo ships, the sounds of rice markets buzzing with trade, became part of the global rhythm of food production and consumption. But as the demand for rice grew, so did the awareness of the environmental costs associated with its production. The intensive farming practices used to increase yields were having negative impacts on the land and the environment. Irrigated rice farming, particularly in countries like China and India, used vast amounts of water, which put pressure on already scarce water resources. The use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides in large-scale farming was also contributing to soil degradation and water contamination. The traditional wet rice farming systems, which had been developed over centuries in Southeast Asia, were being replaced by more industrialized methods that often ignored the delicate balance of ecosystems. The environmental cost of rice farming, though not often discussed in mainstream conversations, was becoming a serious concern. The increase in large-scale rice production also led to the rise of monoculture farming, where a single variety of rice was grown in vast fields. While monoculture farming allowed for higher yields, it also reduced biodiversity and made crops more susceptible to pests and diseases. To make matters worse, the rise of rice farming in floodplains and wetlands was often done without proper regard for the ecosystem. Wetlands, which had once served as a critical part of the landscape, were being drained to make way for rice paddies. The sounds of wildlife, birds, frogs, insects, were replaced by the rhythmic hum of machinery and the murmur of water flowing through irrigation canals. The loss of biodiversity in rice paddies was one of the silent costs of the Green Revolution. One of the most pressing issues of the 21st century is climate change, and rice farming is no exception to its effects. Rising temperatures, changing rainfall patterns, and the increasing frequency of extreme weather events are all putting pressure on rice production worldwide. Rice is particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, as it requires a steady and predictable supply of water to thrive. Flooded rice fields are highly sensitive to changing weather patterns, and droughts or irregular rainfall can severely disrupt yields. For many rice farmers, the sounds of the fields, once the calm and peaceful hum of traditional farming, are now accompanied by concerns over water scarcity, the unpredictability of the weather, and the changing climate. To combat these challenges, innovative solutions are being developed, focusing on sustainability and the future of rice farming. One such solution is the development of drought-resistant rice varieties, which can survive with less water and are more resilient to the effects of climate change. These rice varieties, developed through genetic modification and selective breeding, aim to reduce water usage while maintaining high yields. Another approach is sustainable rice intensification, SRI, a method that involves growing rice with less water, fewer chemicals, and improved soil management. SRI promotes the idea that rice can be grown more efficiently and sustainably by improving the management of water, soil, and nutrients. In addition to these innovations, many farmers are beginning to return to traditional farming methods that focus on maintaining the health of the land. Agroecological practices, such as organic farming and the use of natural fertilizers, are being embraced by a growing number of rice farmers around the world. These practices aim to restore the balance of ecosystems and reduce the environmental impact of rice production. The sounds of these rice farms are more akin to the sounds of the past: the gentle splash of water in the paddies, the rustling of leaves in the breeze, and the quiet, steady work of farmers who tend to the land with respect for nature. Historians still debate the long-term viability of industrialized rice farming. Will the benefits of higher yields and increased production outweigh the environmental and social costs? Or will sustainable farming practices become the standard as the world faces increasing challenges from climate change and environmental degradation? Regardless of the outcome, one thing is clear: rice farming, in all its forms, will continue to be a central part of the world's agricultural systems, and the sounds of rice, the clink of bags, the hum of machinery, the splash of water, will continue to resonate through the global landscape. As we move deeper into the 21st century, the role of rice continues to evolve in ways that reflect both the challenges and innovations shaping global agriculture. The quiet yet powerful presence of rice is felt not only in the fields, but also in the kitchens, markets, and trade routes that sustain the world's population. Rice has become a global commodity, a symbol of both food security and food sovereignty. Yet, as the demand for rice grows and the environmental pressures of industrial agriculture mount, new questions emerge about the future of rice farming and its impact on the planet. One of the most pressing concerns in today's rice industry is the environmental footprint of its production. Rice farming is particularly water-intensive, requiring large amounts of water to flood the paddies. In many parts of the world, this has led to significant water stress, especially in regions already struggling with water scarcity. The challenges of water management in rice cultivation are complex and often deeply tied to local ecosystems. For example, rice paddies are often flooded to a depth of several inches, which creates an environment conducive to growing the crop. However, these flooded fields also release large amounts of methane, a potent greenhouse gas. The process of growing rice in flooded paddies has thus contributed to the growing issue of climate change, with rice farming being responsible for an estimated 10% of global methane emissions. Despite this, rice remains a staple food for over half of the world's population, and any solutions to reduce its environmental impact must balance the need to feed billions with the need to protect the planet. This has led to the development of innovative solutions that aim to make rice farming more sustainable. One such solution is aerobic rice, a new form of rice cultivation that grows the crop without flooding the fields. Instead of being submerged, aerobic rice is grown in dry soil, much like wheat or corn, and is watered only as needed. This method drastically reduces water usage and eliminates the methane emissions caused by flooded fields. While still in the early stages of adoption, aerobic rice shows promise as a way to reduce the environmental impact of rice farming while maintaining high yields. But the story doesn't end with water and methane. Rice farming is also deeply tied to issues of soil health, biodiversity, and the preservation of natural ecosystems. The Green Revolution, with its focus on high-yielding rice varieties and the use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides, has had long-lasting effects on the land. The widespread use of synthetic chemicals has led to soil degradation, water contamination, and a decline in biodiversity. The sound of the rice fields in the modern era, once the peaceful hum of nature, is now often accompanied by the harsh mechanical noise of tractors, the spraying of pesticides, and the drone of irrigation pumps. These sounds are the marks of a system that prioritizes efficiency and productivity over sustainability and harmony with nature. In response to these challenges, agroecology has emerged as a counterforce to industrial agriculture. Agroecological practices, which emphasize biodiversity, soil health, and the use of natural inputs, are gaining traction in rice farming communities. One such practice is integrated pest management, IPM, which aims to reduce the reliance on chemical pesticides by using natural predators, crop rotation, and other strategies to control pests. Additionally, rice farmers are increasingly adopting organic farming methods, which focus on using organic fertilizers, composting, and reducing chemical inputs. These methods not only reduce the environmental impact of rice farming, but also help build more resilient farming systems that are less dependent on external inputs. Rice farming is also undergoing a transformation due to the rise of digital technology. Precision agriculture, which uses data, sensors, and automation to optimize farming practices, is increasingly being applied to rice cultivation. Using satellite imagery and drones, farmers can now monitor the health of their crops, track water usage, and make more informed decisions about when to plant, irrigate, and harvest. The sound of rice fields in the 21st century is now accompanied by the beeping of sensors, the whirring of drones overhead, and the click of buttons as farmers use technology to improve the efficiency and sustainability of their operations. These technological advances allow for more precise water management, helping to conserve resources and reduce the environmental footprint of rice farming. Yet despite all these innovations, the challenge remains: how to produce enough rice to feed the world without further depleting the planet's resources. Rice cultivation in the 21st century is a balancing act between maintaining productivity and protecting the environment. The sound of rice farming, the sounds of water splashing in the fields, the hum of machines, the rustle of leaves, is a reflection of this delicate balance. Rice farming today is at a crossroads. It must evolve to meet the needs of a growing population, while also addressing the urgent need for sustainability and environmental stewardship. The future of rice lies in finding new ways to increase yields without sacrificing the health of the planet. This might mean adopting more sustainable farming practices, integrating new technologies, and embracing innovations like aerobic rice and precision agriculture. It could also mean changing the way we think about rice itself, moving away from monoculture farming and embracing more diverse, resilient farming systems that work in harmony with nature. The sounds of rice farming in the future may not be the loud clatter of machines or the droning of irrigation pumps. Instead, they could be the quieter sounds of nature, the soft splash of water, the rustling of leaves in a well-balanced ecosystem, and the hum of sustainable practices that support both people and the planet. Rice, in all its forms, will continue to be an essential part of the global food system. The challenge now is to ensure that the future of rice farming is sustainable, equitable, and resilient to the challenges posed by climate change and environmental degradation. The sound of rice, the rhythmic splash of water, the steady hum of farming technology, and the quiet labour of farmers will continue to echo across the world, but it is up to us to ensure that the song of rice remains one of harmony and balance, rather than one of exploitation and loss. As we dive deeper into the future of rice, one of the most intriguing areas of development is the role of biotechnology in shaping the crop. Rice, in its many forms, has always been a symbol of resilience and adaptability, but now scientists are working to enhance its genetic potential, creating varieties that can withstand the pressures of climate change, pests, and disease. These innovations are reshaping the way we think about rice farming and could hold the key to feeding a growing global population in an increasingly unpredictable world. Imagine a world where rice can thrive in areas with less water, or in soils that were once considered unsuitable for farming. Thanks to advances in genetic engineering, rice may soon be able to grow with less water, require fewer inputs like fertilizers, and be more resistant to extreme weather events like droughts and floods. This is the promise of genetically modified GM rice, and it's a development that could have profound implications for global food security. The sounds of rice paddies, once defined by the constant flow of water and the laborious task of irrigation, could change dramatically. The gentle splash of water could give way to a more efficient use of resources. Water-saving technologies combined with GM rice varieties could transform rice farming into a more sustainable and resilient practice. One of the most well-known examples of GM rice is golden rice, a variety that has been engineered to produce higher levels of vitamin A. Golden rice was developed to address the global issue of vitamin A deficiency, which affects millions of people, particularly in developing countries where rice is a major part of the diet. The sound of rice farming in regions where golden rice is grown could be a hopeful one, as this biofortified rice could play a key role in improving the health of millions and preventing conditions like blindness and immune system deficiencies. Golden rice could be a game-changer in terms of both nutrition and food security, but its development has been met with controversy. Some people argue that GM crops, including golden rice, pose risks to the environment and biodiversity, while others believe they are necessary to address the challenges of global hunger and malnutrition. The debate continues, but one thing is clear: rice is on the front lines of the biotechnology revolution, and its future will likely be shaped by scientific advancements. Alongside genetic modifications, the rise of precision agriculture is also changing the soundscape of rice farming. With the help of satellites, drones, and sensors, farmers can now monitor every aspect of their fields, water usage, soil health, crop growth, on a much more detailed level than ever before. The sounds of the rice farm, once dominated by human labour, are now increasingly accompanied by the beeps and whirs of technology. Drones fly overhead, capturing high-resolution images of the fields, while sensors in the soil measure moisture levels and nutrient content. Precision farming tools allow farmers to apply water, fertilizers, and pesticides only where they are needed, reducing waste and minimizing environmental damage. In the future, the sound of rice farming could be dominated by the quiet hum of machines working in harmony with the land, ensuring that every drop of water and every gram of fertilizer is used efficiently. However, as we look to the future, we must also consider the social and ethical implications of these technological advancements. The rise of GM rice and precision farming technologies has the potential to revolutionize rice production, but it also raises questions about equity and access. Who controls these technologies? Will small-scale farmers be able to afford the cost of genetically modified seeds or high-tech precision farming tools? As these new technologies continue to evolve, there's a real risk that they will further widen the gap between large agribusinesses and smallholder farmers, particularly in developing countries. The sounds of rice farming could become a tale of two worlds, one of high-tech innovation and the other of exclusion and inequality. Ensuring that the benefits of these advancements are shared fairly will be one of the key challenges of the future of rice. The rise of biotechnology and precision agriculture also highlights a broader ongoing debate in the world of agriculture, the balance between tradition and innovation. For thousands of years, rice farming has been a deeply traditional practice, shaped by centuries of knowledge and cultural practices. The sounds of rice farming, whether in the paddies of Southeast Asia or the fields of West Africa, have always been linked to a sense of continuity and tradition. But as the pressures of climate change, population growth, and environmental degradation mount, there's an increasing need for innovation and technological intervention. The question is, how can we balance the wisdom of traditional rice farming with the need for innovation and progress? Can we create a future where rice farming remains a vital part of cultural identity, while also embracing new technologies that ensure its sustainability and resilience? One answer may lie in sustainable intensification, a farming approach that aims to increase productivity without compromising the health of the land or the environment. Sustainable intensification focuses on improving efficiency, conserving resources, and minimizing environmental impacts, while still producing the food needed to feed a growing world. This approach is gaining traction in the rice sector, with farmers increasingly adopting practices like crop rotation, organic fertilizers, and water-saving technologies. The sounds of sustainable rice farming may be quieter than the hustle of industrial agriculture, but they are full of promise that we can produce more food sustainably and equitably, without compromising the planet's health. As we look toward the future of rice, the path forward is clear. We must embrace both innovation and tradition, ensuring that rice remains a vital, sustainable, and culturally significant crop. The sounds of rice farming will continue to evolve, but the essence of rice, the labor, the community, and the connection to the land will always remain at the heart of its story. From the whir of high-tech machinery to the quiet rhythm of a farmer's hands in the soil, the future of rice farming will be defined by our ability to adapt, innovate, and honor the past while creating a sustainable future for generations to come. As we journey even further into the future, the role of rice continues to evolve, driven by not just technological advances but the global push for food sovereignty and sustainability. The 21st century is seeing increasing demand for rice, due to rising populations and the continued need for staple foods that can feed millions. As we work to meet these needs, we must also grapple with the dual challenge of feeding the world while protecting the planet from the ongoing threats of climate change, soil depletion, and water scarcity. Rice farming, once seen as a traditional practice, is now at the forefront of the global conversation about sustainable agriculture. The growing demand for rice in the face of environmental degradation is forcing a reconsideration of how we farm, where we farm, and what we're willing to sacrifice to keep up with the world's needs. Climate change, with its rising temperatures and unpredictable rainfall patterns, has had a significant impact on rice farming. In regions like South Asia, where rice farming relies heavily on monsoon rains, unpredictable weather is threatening crop yields. The effects of drought, flooding, and extreme heat on rice fields are real and immediate, pushing scientists and farmers to develop new methods of farming that are more resilient to these changes. One of the most exciting developments in the field of rice farming is the use of climate-smart agriculture, a strategy designed to help farmers adapt to the changing climate while reducing the impact of agriculture on the environment. The concept of climate-smart agriculture involves a range of techniques, from improved water management to better soil conservation practices. For rice farming, this means improving irrigation systems to use less water while maintaining or increasing yields. This also includes the promotion of drought-tolerant rice varieties, which can withstand dry conditions, and flood-resistant rice, which can thrive in flooded fields during heavy rains. These innovations are helping rice farmers adapt to the changing climate, but they also highlight the importance of balancing productivity with sustainability. One such example of climate-smart innovation is the development of saturated soil culture, a method where rice fields are flooded with water, but the fields are not completely submerged. This technique can save significant amounts of water compared to traditional rice paddies, while still ensuring a healthy crop. As these new methods take root, the sounds of rice farming are changing. Gone are the days of fields that are flooded continuously. Instead, there is the sound of controlled water management, the careful regulation of water levels to maximize crop yield while minimizing environmental damage. The splash of water, once a steady constant, is now a measured, purposeful movement. Another solution being explored in the fight against climate change is the integration of rice farming with agroforestry, the practice of growing rice alongside trees or other crops. Agroforestry is gaining popularity in regions like Southeast Asia, where forests are being incorporated into rice farming systems to provide shade, improve soil fertility, and reduce water usage. These mixed systems not only help to conserve the environment, but also help farmers to diversify their sources of income, making them more resilient to economic and environmental shocks. The sounds of these agroforestry rice farms are different from the typical rice paddies. There is the rustle of leaves, the chirp of birds, and the peaceful hum of a biodiverse farm. It's a sound that speaks of harmony between agriculture and nature. But as much as innovation is crucial in ensuring rice farming's future, it is equally important to ensure that this future is inclusive. The story of rice farming in the 21st century is also the story of smallholder farmers in developing countries who continue to rely on rice as a primary food source and income. The global rice economy is often dominated by large agribusinesses, but smallholder farmers are the backbone of rice production in many parts of the world. They are the ones who, despite facing limited access to technology, capital and resources, are still managing to produce the majority of the world's rice. In countries like India, Bangladesh and Vietnam, smallholder rice farmers face numerous challenges, from land fragmentation to limited access to credit and markets. Yet, it is these farmers who have the most at stake in ensuring that rice farming remains sustainable. As rice cultivation increasingly moves toward industrial models, there is a growing concern that small-scale traditional farming methods will be pushed aside. To address this, various global organizations, governments and NGOs are working to support smallholder farmers, helping them access better resources, improve productivity, and integrate climate-smart techniques into their farming practices. The challenge of feeding a growing global population with sustainable methods has led to calls for a more equitable global food system. Rice, as one of the world's most important crops, will play a critical role in this system. The sounds of rice farming in the future may not be as dominated by industrial machinery as they are today. Instead, there may be a return to more localized, sustainable farming practices that integrate technology with traditional knowledge. The rhythm of these farms, the sounds of small-scale cultivation, will still be influenced by the global demand for rice, but they will be driven by a new focus on environmental health, fair wages, and local food security. Rice is at the intersection of these global debates. As we move into a future where food security, environmental sustainability, and social equity are all critical concerns, rice farming will need to evolve to meet these challenges. It will require a new kind of approach, one that integrates innovation with respect for tradition, one that uses technology to protect the planet rather than exploit it, and one that ensures farmers of all sizes can thrive in the new global food economy. The sounds of rice, whether it's the hum of drones above the fields, the splashing of water in carefully managed paddies, or the quiet labour of smallholder farmers, will be the sounds of a more sustainable, equitable future. Historians still debate the effectiveness of these approaches. Can the future of rice farming really balance the needs of a growing population with environmental concerns? Or will the push for productivity leave sustainability behind? Will smallholder farmers benefit from the technological advancements? Or will they be left behind in an industrialized future? One thing is certain, rice will continue to play a central role in shaping our global food system, and its future will be defined by the choices we make today about how we farm, who controls the food system, and how we balance the demands of production with the need for environmental stewardship. The future of rice farming, as we've seen, is tightly intertwined with technological innovation, environmental sustainability, and the resilience of smallholder farmers. But as we zoom out even further, we must also consider the role of rice in the broader context of global food security. Rice is not just a crop. It is a cornerstone of global agriculture, essential to the survival of millions of people. As we navigate the complexities of feeding the world's growing population, it becomes increasingly clear that rice will be a key player in how we adapt to the challenges ahead. The world's population is expected to reach nearly 10 billion by 2050, with much of the growth occurring in Asia and Africa. As urbanization continues to accelerate and agricultural land becomes more scarce, the demand for rice is projected to increase. This means that the global rice economy will have to expand in order to meet the needs of billions of people. Yet, as we've discussed, this demand is tempered by the growing environmental concerns that surround rice farming, particularly the depletion of natural resources and the increasing vulnerability of rice crops to climate change. The challenge is clear. We must find ways to increase rice production while simultaneously reducing its environmental footprint. One key approach to meeting these challenges is increasing efficiency in rice farming. The development of new technologies, such as drought-resistant rice varieties, satellite-based irrigation systems, and automated harvesting machinery, holds the potential to boost productivity while minimizing the strain on the environment. Precision agriculture, which uses real-time data to optimize planting, irrigation, and harvesting, could play a crucial role in making rice farming more sustainable. By using fewer resources, such as water and fertilizers, farmers can increase yields while reducing their impact on the land. These technologies promise to change the sound of rice farming, shifting from the noisy bustle of large industrial operations to a quieter, more efficient, and less resource-intensive process. Yet, as we look ahead, it's important to recognize that technological advances alone will not solve the global food crisis. The future of rice farming must also be shaped by policy and social equity. A key part of addressing food insecurity is ensuring that farmers, particularly smallholder rice producers, have access to the resources they need to thrive. This means providing better access to land, credit, and markets, as well as ensuring that farmers are equipped with the knowledge and tools to implement sustainable farming practices. In many parts of the world, rice farming is still carried out by small-scale farmers who rely on traditional methods passed down through generations. These farmers are often excluded from the benefits of modern agricultural technology and find themselves at the mercy of global market forces that they cannot control. The challenge, then, is to create a global food system that is both inclusive and sustainable. As the demand for rice continues to rise, we must ensure that rice farming does not become a tool for exploitation, but rather a means of empowering farmers, especially those in developing countries. One way to do this is through the promotion of fair trade practices, which guarantee farmers a fair price for their crops and ensure that workers are treated with dignity and respect. Fair trade rice can be found in markets around the world, and its success shows that consumers are increasingly interested in the ethical implications of their food choices. By supporting fair trade rice, we can help build a more equitable global rice economy, one where farmers can thrive without sacrificing the health of the planet. In addition to fair trade, we must also explore the concept of food sovereignty, the right of communities and nations to control their own food systems. For rice-producing countries, food sovereignty means the ability to grow and distribute rice without being subject to the whims of global market forces. This concept is especially important in regions like Southeast Asia and Africa, where rice is not just a food source, but a symbol of cultural identity and independence. Countries that produce rice must be able to protect their agricultural systems from the pressures of global trade agreements and foreign corporate interests. Food sovereignty is about creating a system in which rice farmers are empowered to produce rice in ways that are socially, economically, and environmentally sustainable, ensuring that rice remains a tool of cultural pride and economic prosperity. Looking further into the future, we must also consider how rice can contribute to a more circular food system. one that prioritizes sustainability and minimizes waste. Rice husks, which are often discarded as waste, can be repurposed in innovative ways, such as being turned into biofuels or used as a natural building material. Rice straw, another byproduct of rice farming, can be used to produce biodegradable plastics or composted to enrich the soil. These innovations in rice byproducts could help create a more sustainable and closed-loop agricultural system, where every part of the rice plant is utilized and waste is minimized. The sounds of rice farming in the future may not just be the sound of planting and harvesting, but the hum of innovation as rice is transformed into something much greater than just a food source. In the end, the future of rice farming is not just about technological advances or the drive for efficiency. It's also about ensuring that rice continues to be a source of life for millions of people while respecting the environment and promoting social equity. The global rice community must come together to find solutions that are both sustainable and inclusive. The sounds of rice farming in the future, the whirring of machines, the splash of water, the hum of innovation, will be the soundtrack of a world that has learned to balance progress with preservation, productivity with sustainability. As we stand at this crossroads, it's important to remember that rice is not just a crop. It is a symbol of humanity's connection to the land, to culture, and to each other. Whether in the fields of Southeast Asia, the American South, or the rice paddies of Africa, the sound of rice will always be the sound of survival, resilience, and hope for the future. The future of rice is one that will require us to adapt, to innovate, and to respect the delicate balance between feeding the world and protecting the planet. As the world continues to grapple with the future of agriculture and the global food system, rice remains at the center of these discussions. From its origins in the fertile river valleys of Southeast Asia to its status as a global commodity, rice has shaped societies, economies, and cultures for thousands of years. But now, as we face the challenges of climate change, environmental degradation, and the increasing need to feed a growing global population, rice farming must adapt to meet the demands of a changing world. The sound of rice farming in the 21st century is not just the familiar hum of machinery or the gentle splash of water. It's the sound of innovation, resilience, and hope for the future. One of the most significant challenges of the modern era is ensuring that rice farming can withstand the pressures of climate change. Rising temperatures, unpredictable rainfall patterns, and more frequent extreme weather events are all putting rice crops at risk. Farmers in regions like Southeast Asia, where rice is deeply embedded in the cultural and economic fabric, are already feeling the impacts of these changes. The delicate balance between water, soil, and crops is becoming increasingly difficult to maintain, and rice farming is under threat. Flooded fields, which are central to traditional rice cultivation, are vulnerable to both droughts and floods, two extremes that are becoming more common in many rice-growing regions. To address these challenges, scientists and farmers are working together to develop new techniques and varieties of rice that can better withstand the changing climate. One such innovation is flood-tolerant rice, a variety of rice that can survive and even thrive in fields that are flooded for extended periods of time. This type of rice, developed through traditional breeding and genetic engineering, holds great promise for regions where flooding is becoming more common due to erratic rainfall patterns. Similarly, drought-tolerant rice varieties are being developed to help farmers cope with increasing water scarcity. These rice varieties require less water and are more resilient to dry conditions, making them ideal for regions experiencing water shortages. However, even as these new varieties offer hope, they are not without controversy. The debate over genetically modified GM crops, including GM rice, continues to be a major topic of discussion in the agricultural world. Some argue that GM rice could be a crucial tool in feeding the world's growing population, as it offers the potential to increase yields and improve the nutritional quality of rice. Others, however, express concerns about the environmental and ethical implications of genetic modification, particularly when it comes to the impact on biodiversity and the potential for corporate control over seed patents. The sound of rice farming in the future may therefore include not just the sounds of planting and harvesting, but also the hum of ongoing debates about the role of biotechnology in food production. In addition to developing more resilient rice varieties, there is also a growing emphasis on sustainable rice farming practices that prioritize the health of the environment, while still ensuring food security. Sustainable farming methods aim to reduce the environmental impact of rice production by minimizing water use, reducing the reliance on synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, and promoting biodiversity. Techniques such as integrated pest management, IPM, crop rotation, and the use of organic fertilizers are gaining popularity in rice farming communities around the world. These practices aim to work with nature rather than against it, and offer a way forward for farmers who are committed to producing rice in a way that is both environmentally and socially responsible. The challenge of sustainable rice farming is particularly urgent in regions where rice cultivation is taking place on marginal lands or in areas that are vulnerable to soil degradation. The loss of soil fertility is a growing concern in many rice-producing areas, as the intensive use of chemical fertilizers and the practice of monoculture farming deplete the soil's natural nutrients. To combat this, rice farmers are increasingly turning to agroecological practices that emphasize soil health and biodiversity. Agroecology encourages the use of cover crops, organic matter, and diversified farming systems to build soil fertility and improve the resilience of farming systems. These practices are helping to restore the health of rice-growing soils and reduce the environmental impact of rice farming. But it's not just the technical aspects of rice farming that need to change, it's also the economic and social systems that support it. The global rice economy is shaped by a complex web of factors, including trade policies, subsidies, and market forces. In many countries, rice farmers struggle with low prices for their crops, which are often set by global market forces beyond their control. In order to make rice farming more sustainable, it is crucial that farmers receive fair prices for their crops and are given access to the resources they need to implement sustainable practices. This requires stronger support from governments, international organizations, and consumers who are committed to ensuring that rice farming is both economically viable and environmentally sustainable. One of the most promising ways to support rice farmers is through the promotion of fair trade rice, a certification that ensures farmers are paid fair wages for their labour, and that their farming practices meet certain environmental and social standards. By purchasing fair trade rice, consumers can help support smallholder farmers and promote more sustainable agricultural practices. The rise of fair trade rice is a positive development in the global rice industry, as it highlights the importance of ethical sourcing and environmental responsibility in the food system. The sound of rice farming in the future could be one of cooperation and fairness, as consumers and producers work together to create a more just and sustainable global food system. As we look to the future of rice farming will continue to be shaped by the intersection of innovation, tradition, and sustainability. The sound of rice, the rhythmic splash of water, the hum of technology, and the steady work of farmers will continue to evolve as rice production adapts to the challenges of the 21st century. Rice is not just a crop, it is a symbol of human ingenuity, resilience, and adaptability. The way we choose to farm rice in the coming decades will determine not only the future of this essential crop, but also the future of our planet and the generations to come. As we look deeper into the future of rice farming and its place in the global food system, it's clear that we are at a critical crossroads. The decisions we make today will shape the agricultural landscape for generations to come, determining how we grow, distribute, and consume rice in the years ahead. The future of rice is inextricably linked to both the health of our environment and the well-being of the farmers who grow it. And while the sounds of rice farming have changed dramatically over the years, from the gentle splashing of paddies to the hum of machines and drones, one thing remains constant: the essential role rice plays in feeding the world. One of the most important aspects of securing the future of rice is inclusivity. We cannot ignore the voices and needs of the smallholder farmers who produce the majority of the world's rice. These farmers, often living in rural areas and working with limited resources, are the backbone of global rice production. However, they are also the most vulnerable to the forces of climate change, market fluctuations, and social inequality. As the global demand for rice increases, smallholder farmers must be given the tools, support, and access to resources they need to thrive. This includes not only financial support, but also access to better seeds, sustainable farming practices, and market opportunities. Farmers must also have access to education and training that allows them to adapt to new agricultural methods. By embracing innovations like sustainable rice intensification, SRI, or climate-smart agriculture, smallholder farmers can increase yields while reducing their environmental footprint. The key to this is not just providing technological solutions, but ensuring that these solutions are accessible and appropriate for the context in which they will be implemented. The sounds of rice farming in the future could be filled with the voices of farmers learning new techniques, exchanging knowledge, and finding solutions together. Rather than the impersonal hum of industrial agriculture, this future could feature a community of farmers who are working collaboratively to protect both their livelihoods and the planet. Another critical factor for the future of rice is water management. Rice is a water-intensive crop, and in many parts of the world, water resources are becoming increasingly strained. As climate change leads to more unpredictable rainfall patterns, and water scarcity becomes a growing concern, rice farming is facing new challenges. The traditional methods of flooding rice fields, which were once considered the best way to ensure optimal growth, are now being reconsidered. Technologies like aerobic rice, which can grow with less water, or alternate wetting and drying, AWD, a method that reduces water usage while maintaining yields, are helping to address these concerns. These methods may drastically reduce the amount of water used in rice farming and help protect valuable water resources for future generations. In addition to these innovations, more efficient irrigation systems are being developed, from drip irrigation to precision water management using satellite technology. These systems allow farmers to apply water only where it's needed, reducing waste and ensuring that rice crops get the water they need to thrive. The future of rice farming could be characterized by the gentle hum of pumps that efficiently distribute water, the quiet operation of smart irrigation systems, and the careful monitoring of water levels. The sound of rice farming in this future could be quieter, more efficient, and far less resource-intensive than it has been in the past. But as we look to the future of rice, it's not just about technology, it's about policy. Governments and international organizations must play an active role in shaping the future of rice farming. Subsidies, trade policies, and infrastructure investments all impact the rice industry, and these policies must reflect the need for sustainability, equity, and long-term resilience. Governments must also prioritize the support of smallholder farmers, ensuring that they are not left behind in the face of rapid technological advancements and market pressures. The challenge is to create policies that encourage sustainable practices while also promoting economic growth and food security. Food sovereignty, a concept that empowers communities to control their own food systems, will also be key to the future of rice. For rice-producing nations, food sovereignty means ensuring that rice is not just a commodity controlled by global markets, but a crop that is integral to local economies, cultures, and food systems. This approach prioritizes the needs of local farmers and communities, ensuring that rice production serves to strengthen local economies rather than subject them to the volatility of global markets. In a world that is increasingly interconnected, the future of rice also depends on global cooperation. The challenges of climate change, water scarcity, and food insecurity are not confined to one country or region. They are global issues that require a coordinated response. The international rice community, from farmers to policymakers, scientists to consumers, must work together to ensure that rice production is both sustainable and equitable. The future of rice is not just about increasing yields. It's about creating a global food system that is fair, resilient, and able to adapt to the challenges of the 21st century. The sounds of rice farming in the future could be the sound of cooperation and innovation. Imagine the collaboration between farmers, scientists, and policymakers from around the world, all working toward a common goal, to ensure that rice remains a staple food for generations to come, without compromising the health of the planet or the well-being of future generations. The future could be one where rice is grown with less water, fewer chemicals, and more sustainable practices, all while ensuring that smallholder farmers have the support they need to succeed. In this future, rice farming may not sound like the large-scale industrial operations of today. Instead, it could be characterized by the quiet hum of sustainable practices, the gentle flow of water managed with precision, and the voices of farmers working together to shape a more sustainable future. It's a future where rice continues to feed the world, but in a way that respects the planet and the people who grow it. As we journey further into the heart of the future of rice farming, one thing becomes increasingly clear. Rice's role in global food security will always be a balance between productivity and sustainability. As rice continues to be a critical food source for over half of the world's population, the pressures to increase yield and meet demand will continue to rise. Yet, these pressures must be met with careful consideration for the environment. the people who cultivate rice, and the long-term viability of the crop itself. The choices made in this pivotal moment will determine how rice farming evolves and whether it can truly contribute to feeding the world in a way that protects the planet for future generations. The future of rice farming is undoubtedly tied to the ongoing evolution of agriculture as a whole. Sustainable agricultural practices are becoming not only a necessity, but a way forward for the entire global food system. In fact, the shift towards sustainable rice farming might just be the prototype for how other food systems need to change in the face of climate change, population growth, and global inequalities. Rice farming, by nature of its importance and widespread distribution, is a test case for how we can balance high-yield agricultural practices with ecological stewardship. In the past, the predominant model of agriculture has been to maximize yield at all costs. This model often neglected the long-term health of the land and ecosystem. But as awareness of environmental issues and the consequences of unsustainable farming grows, rice farming has become an example of how agriculture can evolve. Practices like sustainable rice intensification, SRI, which promotes higher yields with less water and fewer chemical inputs, are gaining traction in rice-producing countries across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. These practices involve techniques such as reducing the amount of water used in paddies, planting rice with more space between each seedling, and using organic fertilizers. With SRI, the soundscape of rice farming changes dramatically. The continuous flooding of fields is replaced by more judicious water management, where the gentle sound of water trickling through canals is a welcome change from the relentless splashing of water in traditional rice paddies. The air in the fields is different too, less heavy with humidity, but still alive with the buzzing of insects, birds, and the occasional rustle of leaves as farmers tend to their crops. While these methods have been proven to improve rice yields and reduce environmental impacts, they aren't universally accessible. In many rice-growing regions, particularly where smallholder farmers lack access to resources, implementing these practices can be challenging. That's where global organizations, governments, and local communities come into play. To make sustainable rice farming a reality on a larger scale, it is essential that knowledge about these methods is disseminated, that farmers have access to the right tools and resources, and that they are supported in making the transition to more sustainable practices. We must also take a closer look at rice trade and its implications on sustainability. Rice is a global commodity, and international trade in rice influences prices, demand, and the way rice is produced in different parts of the world. The global market for rice is a delicate balancing act, where price fluctuations can either help or hurt farmers. In developing countries, smallholder farmers are often the most vulnerable to these price changes. The rise of industrial farming practices and large-scale rice production has, in some ways, exacerbated the concentration of power in the global rice market, making it harder for small farmers to compete. The future of rice trade, therefore, must be built on a foundation of fair trade principles that prioritize not just economic efficiency, but also social equity and environmental responsibility. Fair trade certification can help smallholder farmers secure better prices for their crops and give them a fairer share of the global rice economy. It can also encourage the adoption of more sustainable farming practices, such as reducing pesticide use and improving labour conditions. In the years ahead, fair trade rice could become more prevalent in global markets, with consumers increasingly making choices that prioritise sustainability and the well-being of farmers over the lowest price. However, the promise of fair trade and sustainability must be approached with a critical eye. There are challenges in ensuring that the benefits of fair trade and sustainable rice farming reach all farmers, particularly those in remote or marginalised regions. Access to markets, information, and training remains a significant barrier for many smallholder farmers. Governments, NGOs, and international organisations will need to work together to bridge these gaps, ensuring that the future of rice farming is equitable, inclusive, and accessible to all. Another area of innovation that is shaping the future of rice farming is urban agriculture. In cities across the world, urban farming has emerged as a response to the growing demand for local food sources. Urban agriculture can take many forms, from small rooftop gardens to large-scale urban farms. While rice is typically associated with rural landscapes, some innovators are experimenting with growing rice in urban environments, using innovative methods like vertical farming and hydroponics. The sound of rice farming in these urban spaces may be quieter, less of the traditional splash of water, and more of the hum of machinery and lights. but it's a sign of how rice farming is adapting to modern urban life. These urban farms could serve as models for how we can grow food sustainably in areas with limited space and resources, contributing to food security while reducing transportation costs and emissions associated with long-distance food transport. As we consider the future of rice farming, we must also be aware of the importance of rice in global diets. For billions of people, rice is more than just a food. It's a cultural staple. It forms the foundation of countless dishes and is a symbol of prosperity, fertility, and cultural identity. Rice is central to the culinary traditions of Asia, Africa, and Latin America, where it serves as the base of almost every meal. The future of rice farming will not only be shaped by technological advancements and environmental considerations, but by the cultural values that rice carries with it. It will be a challenge to ensure that the sustainable, equitable rice farming practices we develop respect the cultural significance of rice, while also meeting the needs of a growing global population. Ultimately, the future of rice is one of balance, a balance between innovation and tradition, between global demand and local needs, between sustainability and productivity. The sounds of rice farming in the years to come may be different from the past, shaped by the rhythms of technology, sustainability, and equity. But the essence of rice, the connection between people, land, and culture, will always remain. It is this timeless connection that will continue to drive the future of rice farming, ensuring that rice remains a vital crop for the world's future generations. As we look toward the future of rice farming, it's clear that this humble crop has the potential to continue shaping our world in profound ways. Yet there are still significant challenges to address if we are to ensure that rice remains a sustainable, equitable, and viable food source for the growing global population. Rice is more than just a crop. It's a symbol of human ingenuity, resilience, and survival, and it holds the key to feeding billions in the years ahead. The sound of rice farming, from the gentle swish of water in traditional paddies to the hum of high-tech machinery, tells a story of constant adaptation, innovation, and a commitment to feeding the world. One of the most pressing challenges is the need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in rice farming. Traditional flooded rice paddies, while effective at growing rice, contribute significantly to the release of methane, a potent greenhouse gas that contributes to climate change. While flooding fields is necessary for rice to grow, the flooded environment also promotes the growth of methane-producing bacteria in the soil. As climate change accelerates, reducing the environmental impact of rice farming is critical. Scientists and farmers are working together to find solutions that can help reduce methane emissions while still maintaining rice production. One promising approach is alternate wetting and drying, AWD, a method that involves periodically allowing rice paddies to dry out between waterings. This method has been shown to reduce methane emissions by limiting the time the rice fields are flooded, while still providing the water necessary for crop growth. In addition to reducing methane emissions, there's also a growing movement to make rice farming more climate resilient. Climate change presents new challenges, including erratic rainfall patterns, higher temperatures, and increased frequency of droughts and floods. Rice, being highly sensitive to these changes, faces significant risks as global temperatures rise. To combat this, scientists are developing climate-smart rice varieties that are more resistant to temperature extremes, drought, and floods. These varieties are being tested in regions where traditional rice farming methods are under threat, and early results are promising. The future of rice farming will require a combination of new crop varieties, improved water management practices, and adaptive farming techniques to ensure that rice continues to thrive in a changing climate. But the future of rice is not just about technology and innovation. It is also about the role of community and cultural heritage. Rice farming, particularly in Asia and Africa, has long been a communal activity, one that brings people together to share knowledge, labour, and resources. It is in these rural communities where the sounds of rice farming have always echoed, the laughter of workers in the fields, the rhythm of footfalls in the waterlogged paddies, the sharing of meals made with rice after a long day's work. These cultural practices are not just about food, they're about identity, tradition, and the sense of connection between people and the land. As we move into the future, it is vital that we preserve these cultural connections to rice, while ensuring that farmers have the support they need to adapt to modern challenges. The rise of agribusinesses and industrial farming has shifted the landscape of rice production, but smallholder farmers, who continue to produce the majority of the world's rice, must not be left behind. The sounds of rice farming in the future need to include the voices of these smallholder farmers, who will play a critical role in maintaining food sovereignty and ensuring that rice farming remains accessible, fair and sustainable. By supporting these farmers, we can preserve the cultural significance of rice while empowering communities to thrive in a rapidly changing world. At the same time, we must recognise the importance of global cooperation in addressing the challenges of rice farming. The global rice trade, which links countries and regions around the world, has the potential to foster cooperation and collaboration between nations. But this also comes with challenges, as the rice market is influenced by trade policies, subsidies, and geopolitical factors that often prioritise the interests of wealthy nations or multinational corporations over smallholder farmers in developing countries. Ensuring that the voices of rice farmers are heard in international trade negotiations and that the global rice market supports sustainable farming practices will be crucial in shaping the future of rice farming. One solution to this is the concept of fair trade rice, which emphasises the importance of ensuring that rice farmers receive a fair price for their labour and that their farming practices align with environmental sustainability. The rise of fair trade certifications for rice has the potential to transform the global rice economy by promoting ethical sourcing, equitable trade, and more sustainable practices. By choosing fair trade rice, consumers can support rice farmers who are committed to producing rice in a way that respects both the environment and the people who grow it. The future of rice could very well depend on the choices we make as consumers, whether we are willing to pay a little more for rice that is grown sustainably and equitably. As we move forward, it's clear that the future of rice farming will be a complex blend of tradition and innovation, of local knowledge and global technology. It will require cooperation between farmers, policymakers, scientists and consumers to ensure that rice remains a food source that is both abundant and sustainable. The sounds of rice farming will continue to evolve, whether it's the quiet hum of modern irrigation systems, the gentle splash of water in a sustainable paddy, or the soft footsteps of farmers working the land in the early morning light. What remains unchanged, however, is the central role rice plays in feeding the world, in connecting people to the land, and in shaping cultures across the globe. Rice is, after all, more than just a crop. It is a testament to human ingenuity, resilience, and the deep, enduring connection between people and the earth. As we face the challenges of the 21st century, the future of rice will depend on how we manage the delicate balance between feeding a growing population, protecting the environment, and respecting the traditions and cultures that have nurtured this crop for millennia. The future of rice is a future we must shape together, one where the sounds of rice farming echo through the centuries, preserving its legacy while ensuring its place in the world to come, 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 place in the world to